Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pointers with the Pros. My name is Kaylin, and I am joined once again by Michael.
Hello.
We had the privilege to sitting down and chatting with Jeremy, who is a Dustless Blasting business owner. And so he had lots of really good stuff to say. So I think we're just going to kind of dive in here and let him introduce himself. He had a lot of experience in the automotive restoration, the
Mhm.
auto industry, and even had a sales job there briefly, but
Oh,
showed some,
18 years. Yeah.
quite, quite briefly,
Quite briefly.
very briefly. Um, and so I wanted him to kind of introduce himself, give us his background, and see kind of why he ended up being a good fit for owning his own dustless blasting business. So let's take a look.
So my background, a little of both things. So I've always been a gearhead, wrenched on cars, built cars, worked on cars.
Mm.
And then I did about 18 years of outside sales and cold calling here where I live. So I have an extensive background in sales and also in the automotive industry as well. Before I got into sandblasting like I'm doing now, I'd done some sandblasting in a small cabinet, two different scales, completely different ball games for sure.
So yeah, like you said, cars was his passion his entire life
Yeah.
from when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And combined with his many years of experience in sales, he was able to sort of put those two together and start his own shop.
Yeah. And I think one of the driving factors, I've seen a lot of people who get into this business because they have a passion for something.
Yeah.
And I think that's best case scenario. I mean, some people have a passion for just owning their own business.
Mhm.
That's great. In this sense, Jeremy, always had that passion for car restoration. And so in that, with owning an auto body shop, he found himself needing to outsource a lot of his sandblasting needs. And that's kind of where he first started considering maybe going into business for himself and, on this side of things.
Right.
So I'll let him touch on what that need was for his auto shop and then how it kind of turned into a business opportunity for himself.
Yeah, so kind of what started it out was about 5 years ago, I had quit my job and went full time into building hot rods. So I started a company, Jay's Garage and Auto Works, and there was a gentleman in town. His name was Bob with Master Blasters, and he had done all my sandblasting. He was like the go-to guy in town for probably 25, 30 years. Well, he did one car for me, went great. Next one came along, and he retired. So I was like, oh, crap. And at that time, this is going back probably 3 years ago, give or take, a little over 3 years ago. And so I reached out, found another gentleman. I was building a 67 C10 for a customer, and I needed the body blasted. So I called this guy. He takes care of it. I drop it off. He does a great job doing it. And, I get the bill, and it was $200 an hour. So I'm like thinking, I'm okay. Like, well, I have 9 full builds that need to be sandblasted. And I'm like, $200 an hour. He charged me X dollars to blast it, which was fair, I thought. Did a wonderful job. And I'm like, dude, I can pay for a third of this equipment if I just get a machine and do it myself. And so at that time, I just started Googling, went online. I didn't know anything about blasting, dustless blasting, anything really. And so I just started looking around. And of course, you guys do a fantastic job marketing. I'm like, ooh, dustless. I'm like, what's this about? So I started watching videos and watching you guys' channel. I'm like, this is really rad. I was like, this is almost like I said, I didn't know much about it at the time. And because all the blasting that Bob had done with Master Blaster was all dry blasting. So I saw this dustless thing and I'm like, dude, that's perfect. I'm in a subdivision. I'm not going to make this huge mess. I'm not going to upset the HOAs. Neighbors will be probably just fine with it. And then talking back and forth with my wife and some friends, just bouncing some ideas off of it. I'm like, you know what? What's wrong with it? I started my hot rod company. That's going. Why not get another one going? So then I reached out to you guys, spoke with one of your guys' salespersons. It was nice because he took the time to go over things, to answer all my questions. And basically, I went and got financing for it. And then I pulled the trigger. And I had it shipped from your guys to my location here. Got it off the trailer, was super excited about it. Watching videos, got the machine fired up my backyard. It's on YouTube, right? You can figure it out.
So I know, Jeremy briefly talked about, the automotive industry, how he first got that business started. Something I do think is important to note for people who are considering pursuing car restoration is your auto body shops and your painters are very particular.
Mm.
The automotive space, these machines are great for that space. We've seen much success in that space. That's how we first started is really advertising towards auto body shops. However, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know um, the right technique to blast cars or else you can damage it. So I think it's important to note there that, Jeremy really only had one guy that he trusted to do these cars, and there's a reason for that.
Hmm.
So if you are going to pursue automotive restoration, make sure you talk to us before you just start blasting a car. Like, we want to give you that feedback. We want to tell you, hey, here's what media you should use. You should do the body panels wet with the
Hmm.
generous standoff distance, do the interior dry so you can blow those that spent media out. But don't just start if you don't have any experience. I wouldn't just go blast a car right away. I would maybe dial that in and really learn that market and how to operate the machine correctly for that.
Right. And you're dealing with like the everyday person whenever you blast cars. Like they care about their cars. That's one of
Yes.
their most valuable assets, right? The result has to be aesthetically pleasing as well. It's not just like you're blasting steel for a business. It doesn't really matter
Right.
what it looks like. It just needs to be, a certain type of blast. People care about their cars.
Yeah. And I don't want to scare people away. Like, it can be done. I've seen people who have never sandblasted before at all turn into, you know, car,
Yeah.
sandblasters, and they focus on that. But it did take a little bit of a learning curve to get that right and build that confidence.
Yeah. There's some finesse needed.
But me being here my whole life, social butterfly, sales background, before the machine even gets here, I'm out knocking on doors. Any metal shop that I can find, machine shop, powder coat shop, it didn't matter. I'm like, hi, my name is Jeremy. I'm gonna start sandblasting. And of course, people are like, well, do you have experience in it? I'm like, not really, but I'll figure it out, right?
Right. The weekend that he got his machine, he already had a large fuel tank job lined up that Monday.
Oh, wow.
So he just
Got to get on it quick, Jeremy.
he brought his 500S in his backyard.
Because I had a job scheduled for that Monday. It was for a machine shop in town, and it was a giant fuel tank for a mine. Way to get broke in. I mean, the tank was 35 feet tall and 25 feet across. And here I am. I'm like, oh, crap. Well, if you're going to go for it, right?
Yeah,
And,
that's really brave for like the first job, the coming Monday, right when you get the machine.
I know. And that's why I'm sitting in the backyard. I'm like, all right, I got to figure this thing out. I can't look like a dummy showing up on the job site with all these people in the back of my mind. I'm thinking like, everybody's gonna be sitting here staring at me. Like, what's this guy doing blasting this big thing? So I'm in the backyard. I'm like, all right, cool. Here's how I finally got it going. Here's how you control the media. Here's how you do this, this, and this.
Yeah, so his prior experience sandblasting sort of helped him out at the beginning to understand what to do. And of course, owning an auto body shop, he already knew how to handle air hoses and how those things connected, that kind of stuff. So putting together his machine from it getting shipped was pretty straightforward for him.
Which isn't usually what we see the most. Like,
Yeah.
most of the time, it's pretty much the opposite, where we get people who are like, yeah, I feel confident in my ability to figure it out, but it does take them time, and they're taking on like really, they're I want to say cheap because they lower their price and say,
Mhm.
hey, I'm happy to blast this for you, just so I'm kind of new, so I'm going to be experimenting here. Or they find trash from like what's the word I'm thinking of? They
Junk?
find
Like to
junk
test
from
on?
a junkyard
Yeah.
and go and blast that and learn how to, change their operating pressure. And so I think that's a great idea if you have a job lined up and you need to practice on something.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so on that Monday, I roll up to the job site and get my equipment out. And of course, kind of like I thought, everybody's sitting there staring at me like, what's this guy doing? Because this company I did it for, they have a huge blast room. So they do almost all their own blasting unless it won't fit in their blast room. And so I'm like, man, these guys are probably sitting here like, what's this guy doing? He's got a little green suit on, like a little Martian cruising around.
Yeah.
You had a Nova suit?
Yeah, so when I got the machine from you guys, I wanted the whole meal deal. I wanted to make sure I had everything I needed. I got the Nova suit from you guys. I got the, the little jumpsuit, the little green suit. I got the helmet from you guys, the breathing hose. I wanted everything necessary for a turnkey setup. I think at the time I got 20 bags of material, if I remember correctly. I can't remember what it was when it was a package deal. I got the rust inhibitor. I got as much as I knew, the 100 feet of hose, that you have the feed hose and an additional length of hose with it. And then the one nozzle that came with the machine. Yeah. And so that job, gosh, it took me 5 days, 12 hours a day to do it. I went through 20,000 pounds of material. And of course, at that time, I had never ran a man lift. I had never ran a blaster like that, and I just kind of, like I said, everything I've done kind of for the most part has been like self-taught. I'm like, well, if somebody else is doing it, I'm human, they're human. I should be able to figure this out. And talk about figuring out the machine. Because day one when I got there, keep in mind the machine was new. I ran it in my backyard. I hit the trigger and nothing was happening. And I'm like, crap. And so basically what it was, the Parker valve.
Yeah.
Stuck. I'm like, man, it's a brand new machine. Yeah, stuff happens, right? No big deal. So I call up Luis at you guys' place there. Super cool guy. Wonderful. He's like, he gets on his phone. He's like, hang on, stand by. Sends me a quick link right to your guys' site. I watch the video, pull it apart. And of course, the guy's walking out. The boss man's like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, oh, I just got to do a little bit of maintenance. He's like, isn't your machine brand new? I said, yeah, it's new. I said, but stuff happens. You know how it was. You just kind of giving me crap. So that little Parker valve, took it out and just basically lubed up the little O-rings on it, put it back in, rock and roll. Rest was history, just started burning diesel, burning material. Yeah, that's the start of where I am now, essentially. Just right out of the gate. Why not go big, I guess,
Oh, I hate that. That's never something that you want to hear, especially someone who picks up a new machine. So I want to say we are so sorry that this was your experience, especially your first time out there on a job, using your brand new machine that, you paid for and are proud of. And so definitely sorry about that. But,
Right.
He's right that there are certain things that you do have to maintain and take care of, and the Parker valve is one of those things that you just have to keep lubed up. And so I'm glad that Lewis was able to help him and he was able to get that fixed. But definitely something that shouldn't have happened, and that we will take back to our QC team to make sure they're staying on top of that before machines get rolled out the door here.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to commend him for thinking on his feet, though. He called Lewis, and we actually have a video that you made about how to service that Parker valve. It's a relatively easy procedure, but needless to say, he shouldn't have needed to do that, on a brand new machine. But overall, glad to hear that his experience with our support team has been fantastic, and that he's trucking on.
Yeah, our tech support is really something that we are proud of, because Lewis and Bobby both are taking calls and helping people, not only for just how-to issues, like how do I do this in the beginning, but also when it's time to service those machines on a monthly basis, they're there to help support them in that too. So.
Right.
So you have an extensive mechanical background, as you said, and you've just spoken about your experience with Lewis and our parts department. Have there been any other experiences like that with our support team? Could you tell me about those?
Yeah, no, I've had, it's one of those things where it's equipment and it gets used hard in industrial places. So I had all sorts of phone calls. Nothing wrong with the equipment. It's learning. I'm really, I don't know if I'd say anal about it, but I want to know everything there is to know about everything possible with what I'm doing. And especially if I'm out in the field, that kind of thing. So, maintenance and parts. I'm super anal about maintenance. I do all my own maintenance myself. It's really been a turnkey machine. I've had excellent experience. I'll call in, whether I need parts, call in, hey, I need filters, I need X, Y, and Z. Your staff has been phenomenal about knowing what I need, very knowledgeable. I'm old school, so I prefer a phone call. I know I can go online. Your guys' online store is excellent. It's laid out well. To me, it's easy to navigate. And I know it's my generation, but I'm kind of challenged on the internet, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
But I like that phone call. I like that personal touch of, hey, I can call you guys. Somebody will pick up the phone and they'll help me out with my needs. If I need parts, if I have a question during sales, or if I have a tech question. Luis has been fantastic. I can text him, I can call him. I think even one time there was a weekend and I was very surprised. I felt bad. I'm like, man, I don't want to bug him on the weekend. And he responded. I couldn't believe it. It was wonderful.
That's great to hear that that overall your maintenance needs and your support needs have been met. How do you feel about the machine overall specifically? Like, because I know you've been looking at potentially getting another machine. Is there anything about the 500 that is lacking, or anything that you really like about it?
So, yeah. So on my DB500, I love the machine. When I first got into it, I mentioned before that I didn't know a lot about it. And knowing what I know now, I would have gone with a lot larger machine. Now, the DB500 is absolutely perfect, I feel like, for cars, for car
Okay.
bodies, for more, I would call it light industrial use. When I was doing that fuel tank, I noticed coupling, 100 feet of hose together, trying to maintain 120 PSI, running the copper slag, and making it really efficient, if you will. I wouldn't say it struggled, but I felt like I could have done better, not based off of like the machine does a bad job for what it is, just based off of the compressor size.
Right. Exactly.
I do love it's small as far as nimble. I can back it into really tight areas. It's all compact. The machine, like I said, the machine as a whole for what it is absolutely wonderful. I don't have any complaints on it other than the fact that it's not really a complaint. It's just you've got a knife versus like a machine gun for different battles, if you will, right?
Mm.
And it's an excellent machine to do probably 90% of what's out there in my area for what I do. It's great for the log home side of things. One disadvantage essentially on my part is I would like a larger compressor for volume so I can couple together, let's say 300 feet of hose.
Yeah.
So I'm not moving the machine 2 or 3 times on the job site, which it's super simple to move. Uncouple the hoses, unclick it, but the hoses are heavy, of course, just by nature to drag them around in the next area. So,
Gotcha.
but as a whole, the DB500, I love it. It's been, in my opinion, very user-friendly.
I would say this is the response from 99% of people who own a DB500 truly.
Yeah.
It used to be our entry level machine. We've kind of talked about that before. It's a great scalable machine. However, like he said, when you run into bigger commercial jobs that either require a bigger surface area for you to blast at one time. If you have a
Mhm.
big, if you're blasting a Sam's Club, you want a nozzle that can cover a large surface area so you're not there forever. Or if you're like him and you're blasting log homes, a log home doesn't require a large it doesn't require a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
but it does require a few hundred feet of blasting hose, and you will see a drop of pressure with any machine if you extend your hose, extend your hose, extend your hose.
Mhm.
So for people who are like, hey, I want to be prepared for any job that comes my way ever, we do recommend the 800 mobile because it comes with that 300 CFM compressor. And if you add 200 feet of hose, you're still going to be productive with that air compressor.
For sure. And there's also a couple other factors like elevation, right? That
Yeah.
also affects your pressure, and just the added convenience as a sole operator of
Yeah.
just not having to move your machine as much, especially if
Mhm.
you're doing the type of work that he's doing, like large log homes or, fuel tanks that require you to go around, use a lift, right?
Yeah.
All those things.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you have to ask yourself when you're choosing a machine, what is most important to you? Is it an entry level price for when you're just starting out and you're okay with having that smaller air compressor since you will be able to do the job. It's going to take you a little bit longer
Hmm.
um than it would with the 800, or are you wanting to really hit the ground running with those bigger jobs and get them done quicker? Because all of our machines do the same thing.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just a matter of how quickly do you need it done. And when you're on a commercial, job site where there's other people involved, they want you in and out quick.
Hmm.
They don't want you there forever. So those are the main things to consider is your budget, your towing capacity, and yeah. So I think at the time you talked to Jeremy, he was hitting it hard with the log homes.
Oh yeah.
Log home season, and then had, some more automotive work, but really the guy's done anything and everything. And we've talked about how versatile the machine is. So if you see something that's painted or rusted or dirty or stained, that is your market. But now I think, we'd like to talk more about that automotive industry since he does come from that background.
Yeah.
He hit a few talking points that he's going to go over, but one is the media preference that he uses. And I thought it was interesting. This media preference didn't really come from him as the blaster. It came from him as the painter afterwards.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to make your painter happy, listen to what Jeremy has to say about the media choice for car restoration.
What kind of jobs are you taking on right now?
I'll take on basically anything that my machine is capable of doing. And so, I do right now, it is log cabin season. So I'm doing a lot of log homes, a lot of decks, wood stuff in general. And then I do a lot of cars. I do a lot. I've probably done, so this will be my second, 2.5 years roughly in business. And I've probably done already 30 complete cars. I do a lot of sheet metal.
We got Jay's car here. Not mine, different Jay. 67 Buick Skylark. We're gonna blast the back half first, then we'll put the wheels back on it. We're doing just an exterior only on this one. He's having the bumpers all re-chromed, and then the emblems taken off. So here's just a little walk around first. Then we'll show you a walk around when we're all done. All right, she's all done. I stayed off the center of the hood. The center is not glued down to the supports. Same with kind of the roof section of it here. But she turned out pretty good. Same on this back section. These back panels across here are super thin. Just rather be safe than sorry on it. 67 Buick. Cleaned up nicely. I can get in here or not. The camera, we've got all the fender wells up in here. Got the back ones. A little bit of rust back here, not bad though.
I love it. You got to be very mindful and careful because you can warp sheet metal really quickly if you don't pay attention. I do tractor wheels, pots and pans, bathtubs, those old school radiators that are in houses that use to heat houses. I have a church that I've got to go do some old school crown molding on. Wheels for trucks. I've done transmissions, frames. People when they want to re-season some of their griddles for their barbecuers, I'll do that. There was a gentleman that built a huge cooktop for a big event. It was an 8-foot by 8-foot surface, and I had to blast off all the mill scale to get down to bare steel so then they could season it properly.
It sounds like you're doing everything.
Yeah, this guy brought me a barbecue that was a giant pig. He built it in the shape of a pig, and so that was pretty neat. It was all painted, but it was pretty cool. It was worn out, so I went through and blasted it. So it was kind of neat. Fiberglass. I'll do a lot of boats, aluminum boats, fiberglass boats. Anything and everything, honestly. There's no job too big or too small that I won't tackle.
Tell me about your decision-making process whenever you accept a job, right? And say it's sheet metal. Let's use that for example. What steps do you go through to determine what abrasive you're going to use, whether you're going to blast dry or wet, what pressure you're going to use? Tell me about that.
So sheet metal wise, based off of thickness, and I'll use cars as an example. That's fine because I do a lot of that. So most cars, as far as I guess the abrasive that I use, so over here, they don't really specify it as 40, 70. They kind of call it an 80 grit or a 50 or a 36. I prefer the 80 grit. Now the 50 will cut faster and you're more efficient. I like the 80 because it's a lot smoother profile, and usually the painter side of things, they really appreciate that. They don't have to hammer on the primer as hard or do as much additional prep after I'm done. As far as wet versus dry blasting is concerned, I probably do, and I do probably 90% dry, mainly because I have property I can blast on.
Okay.
Now, I do have customers that call me up and are like, hey, I would prefer my vehicle to stay here. Can you do it at my house? No problem, sir. And then when it comes to that, when I'm quizzing the customers, of course, the prices change from dry versus wet. Because when you do wet, you got to have the rust inhibitor. It takes a little more time, to fill the pot with water, etc. And I found out the hard way, I can't run 80 grit and wet blast. It compacts like concrete in the pot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I struggled. I remember I had one job. I sat there. I felt awful. The guy was probably like, "Are you really this new? Like, do you not know what you're doing here?" Because I struggled and struggled, and I had to hand scoop it out and rinse it out. But it's all part of the learning process, right?
Hmm.
So I use 50 grit when it comes to that, of course.
So Jeremy brings up a good point here.
Yeah.
Something that I think we should clarify. 40 to 80 grit is optimal for wet blasting.
Yep.
Any coarser and some problems can occur, and any finer, it'll clump.
Yep.
Like in Jeremy's case. When it comes to dry blasting, it doesn't really matter. Any mesh is fine.
Yep. For people who don't know, really what we're talking about is abrasive materials come in all different shapes and sizes. And so when we talk about grit sizes or mesh sizes, we really are talking about the size of that individual particles. And so when you see that 40-70, that's actually in reference to the mesh size. And ironically, the bigger the number, the smaller the particle, and the smaller the number, the bigger the particle. So, he clearly is recommending when you're in need of using a super fine media, whether a fine, mesh size, or something like soda, you would want to do that dry, instead of wet, for sure. I do want to point people in the right direction. If you're like, I have no idea what media to use when and where, we do have a media guide on our website that goes over not only the mesh size, because that's important, but also the type of abrasive it is. Because there are two main types for either creating an anchor profile for new paint to adhere to it, or leaving the surface really smooth for cleaning purposes. So,
Right.
But yeah, pressure-wise, so most sheet metal, it's pressure and standoff, essentially. I usually run most stuff between 75 to 80 PSI, unless the job is further away from my machine. If I'm not running my 50-foot hose and I'm running like 100-foot, based on the foot length of the hose, I'll just bump the pressure up to usually about 100. And then same thing, it's kind of weird. Every piece of sheet metal I do, I touch it. And it sounds weird, but I want to feel if it's soft, if it's what I call like oil candy. So like on a door, for instance, for a truck or a car. Stuff has been blasted in the past sometimes that I'll touch, and stuff hasn't. But I go up and I'll feel the door and I push on the big flat panel areas, because if it's super squishy with my hand, I know to stay off of it.
This big old boat. It's pretty neat. Didn't touch the frame though. So all the firewall, the whole outside. It didn't get on the roof. It's too thin. The whole inside. The underside. A lot of sheet metal here.
The beauty of the wet system that you guys offer, I love it, because the sheet metal almost never gets warm. But just because it doesn't get warm doesn't mean you still can't warp the sheet metal. I know it kind of contradicts itself, but a combination of pressure, and I know heat, even though there's almost no heat when you're wet blasting, you can still hurt that panel. And you hurt a few panels. I mean, I live here in Boise, Idaho. It's huge now, growing like crazy, but it's still a small town. You warp a few bodies or you hurt some stuff, you're not going to get very many more phone calls. They're not going to call you anymore.
Right.
And so I'm always super leery. Even though I've done over 25 cars, I'm still leery on every one I do every time. But I'll do that. I'll go through, I'll fill the car, and I'll talk to the customer up front. Hey, this area, I'm not going to touch it. You're going to have to run a DA sander or your preference. I'll do everything else, but these couple areas, and they all understand. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, I get it. I'd rather you not do it than do it. But then again, you'll get other guys that are like, oh, no problem. I'll go ahead and do it. And they may not hurt it. I'd just rather err on the caution side and just say, hey, here's where I'm at. You know what I mean?
So something Jeremy said that I think I just need to pause and recap here, because a lot of people say when they're wet blasting, if they're wet blasting at a super high pressure and they're super close to the car, they're like, hey, it still warped the panel.
Yeah.
So yes, imagine if you walked up to the side of a car and you kicked it with your foot. It will dent the vehicle.
Right.
So he's right that, the water does prevent heat and the friction, and that's what causes warping. However, when you're wet blasting, you get a lot more impact and velocity out of your media than you do with dry air, which is why a lot of people love it because it increases that production rate.
Yeah.
But if you're standing too close to a thin body panel, you are going to dent it. So it's not really warping. It's just hitting the heck out of that body panel. So
Yeah.
make sure when you're wet blasting, you just adjust your standoff distance, start at a lower pressure. And then if you're not seeing the production rate that you like, you can always take a step closer. Or you can always increase your pressure settings. So I just want to note the difference there because I've seen that a lot on our social media. And I think it's good to point out.
No, that's a good thing to point out. Definitely. Yeah, as you said, even wet blasting isn't idiot proof. Like you can still mess it up. It's just less likely that you will. It reduces the risk.
Right.
And you're more productive given the media that you spend.
Yeah.
I totally understand. And yeah, pressure is the other side of the equation aside from heat. So we do get that. Have you wet blasted a car before?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's why. So it's kind of comical. Before I knew you could go dry with the machine, I wet blast the first like 500 hours. I was wetting everything. I had no idea that you could run it dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've probably done about 10 cars. I wouldn't say complete, but I've done cabs or doors or beds wet. Big suggestions when you're doing stuff wet when it comes to cars.
Yeah.
Only do exteriors wet. Don't do the inside. And people probably already know this, and maybe they don't because it clumps up. It's very difficult to get that out of a pocket, like in a cab corner or under a dash, that kind of thing. But it's a wonderful feature, especially when it's like 100 degrees outside, because you don't have to wear the helmet. I mean, when I wet blast, it's sixes, right? If it's 100 plus degrees outside and I'm wet blasting something, I have, goggles, safety gear on. But what's nice is that mist keeps me cool. So I love it for that. And customers are like, what? I can show up in their house, their driveway, and I can wet blast something. I'm like, holy cow, that's incredible. They can stand way back and watch the process. There's no dust form. And they actually get to see it in action. Rather their cell phones like filming away. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, this is so cool. So it's really awesome to have that feature up on the wet side of things. It's fantastic for that. And I think it helps a little bit on the abrasion side of things too, because not only are you throwing material or media at it, you're also putting water, which is not super abrasive, but at the right pressures, it definitely is, in my opinion.
So a lot of people have asked, hey, what does prepping and containment and masking look like? And so Jeremy really touches on this here. He names a lot of different resources, a lot of different products, and really this all comes down to personal preference. With automotive restoration, you are going to have to mask off areas that you don't want blasted. So I'll let him touch on that. But then there's also a resource in our academy that just talks about basic masking options and techniques. So that'll give you an idea as well if you're looking for those tips.
How do you approach masking off areas that you don't want to be affected by the abrasive when you're blasting a car? What are you using?
So what I'll do in two ways, I guess. I love frog tape.
Okay.
And I like the frog tape for a couple of reasons. It sticks extremely well, and especially when you're blasting, well, when it's warm outside, it doesn't leave a residue when you go to peel it off. So the process I use, and I do a lot of these where customers, I have people who will literally drive their car to my lot, driving, we'll pull out the headlights and taillights in my lot. The customer, I will do it, or I'll just do it myself. And then we'll start masking off. So what I'll do is I'll get that little spray away Windex stuff that you get like at Costco, the aerosol Windex, and I take a microfiber. And all the airs on the mask off, I spray it, I clean it very well. And I'll take the frog tape and I'll take a border around the outside. And then I use what's called X board or Ram board. It's a thick cardboard that you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's that's on a roll. And it's meant for hardwood floors to lay down to protect them when people are doing construction. And what I'll do is I'll take that and I'll cut out the shape of the glass or the window or whatever object I don't want the material to blast. Then I take Gorilla tape, not duct tape, but Gorilla brand. You want the black one. The black one's more abrasive resistant than anything else. And then I go over the frog tape and that cardboard at the same time. And what that does is that creates a massive barrier. I don't know if you've ever done it or not, but it's very difficult. You can blast through the tape, but if you nick it a few times when you're blasting, it doesn't affect it.
Okay.
It definitely takes me some time to do it, but it's all in the prep work. Because if I etch that piece of glass, I don't want to buy a windshield. Not
Right.
only that, I don't want the customer upset. So, like I said, I use the frog tape. I'll use that X board. I don't use any plastic because it's too easy for me to go through plastic. Um, and then I mask off each area. Like I said, it's either windshields, door glass, back glass on the vehicle itself. Normally bumpers and stuff are removed. If they're not removed, I'll just take on the bumpers and go around the edges and do the same thing with that portion there. Wheels and tires, a lot of times what I'll do, depending on what I'm doing, is I have a jack that I have that has these big wheels on it. And I call it my sandbox because it rolls nicely through there from all the material. I'll jack it up, put it on jack stands in my lot, pull off the wheels and tires. And then at that point, I'll take black trash bags and I'll bag the rotors and brakes to keep debris from getting inside there.
Cleanup. Say you're in someone's driveway and we can do dry blasting and wet blasting. Like, what are you doing to contain the area? How are you picking up that debris, and where are you taking it?
So on the wet blasting side, if I'm at a customer's house and I'm blasting it there, I'll typically bring a couple rolls of Visqueen. I'll roll it out underneath the car. I go out as far as I can because it's like a
Okay.
slurry, but it can still go. And most of the time, I've only done a few where I've been in driveways or concrete areas where I have to do that. And so when I'm done, usually it's a warm day, but a lot of times I'll roll everything up in a bag and I'll take it with me. I go back home, I lay it out, I let it dry, I put it in bags, or I can actually take it to my local transfer station and they'll take it from that point there for it. I let them know what it is. Hey, I blasted a vehicle. There's paint materials in here, etc. And luckily on my side of things, we have a thing here where they'll actually take all that material from us. No problem whatsoever. Dry blasting wise, I'm usually like in a farmer's field or out like in the sticks. And for lack of a better word or lack of better, I just let it fly. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no real cleanup at that point. I just go out there and I'll dry blast it. A lot of times if I'm in an area where I need to clean stuff up, I always keep a leaf blower with me. And then, of course, I have different blowers that I utilize that I attach to my DB500 to blow off the car when I'm all done. But I found cleanup-wise, especially on a vehicle, a leaf blower to me works best because it's volume. You can just get out there, put the backpack blower on, I blow off the whole car. If it's on a customer's property where I need some cleanup, I'll blow everything off to one side. But I try to be as mindful as I can for the customer. And it's all about, prepping the customer in advance. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, we're going to wet blast your car. Here's what's going to happen. Expect some slurry, some stuff. Most of them don't mind at all. Dry blasting, hey, it's going to be a dust cloud. So if you're okay with that, we can do it at your house. If not, I have what I call my sandbox. You can bring it to my yard, and I can blast it for you there. So, yeah, that's kind of how I guess the cleanup, if you will. Not much cleanup on the dry side. The wet side, a little more because, of course, you're containing the material. It's not flying around. You pick it up, you take it with you, and you haul it away.
I find that a lot of automotive guys who, like that is one of their tried and true, applications and jobs, they all have something on site at their house. And a lot of them actually will go out, do the bigger jobs during the day, and then come home and they'll charge like only $200 an hour instead of their standard
Mm.
$300 an hour for people to bring their car to them if they're able to. And then they'll just knock out that job at the end of the day. They roll their machine up and do it, and then that way they're not spending their daytime
Yeah.
on those smaller projects, and they're still able to kind of capitalize on both
Right. Because
types of
if you're
jobs.
running like a mobile business and you're driving everywhere, you don't want to discount your rate. But
Right.
if you're at home and
Yeah.
and people are bringing the work to you, it's extra money.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
And I assume you have to factor that into your pricing as well. The amount of effort it takes to contain that stuff and to clean it up whenever you're wet blasting in someone's driveway.
Yeah. And the big advantage, I think, of being the biggest advantage, in my opinion, and you guys probably, I know you have this on your site too, is being mobile, right? You have that ability to, it saves somebody from having to have a place to do it and having that overhead. So you're mobile. So one, you got to factor in, yep, I'm driving to X, Y, and Z's house. And then, yeah, it definitely affects the price wet because you have the rust inhibitor, you have the cleanup. So typically, if somebody wants their vehicle wet blasted versus dry blasted, and to me, I'll do whatever the customer prefers. I'll educate them both directions, but I literally charge like $300 an hour to wet blast a car. I mean, the rust inhibitor is not going down in price, and the one that you guys have is the best rust inhibitor, period. I've tried 4 brands, and whatever concoction you guys have, it's phenomenal. Nobody can beat it. I even did tests with your guys and stuff where I would go out there and I blasted a hood. I let it sit out there. I put a sprinkler on it. 3 or 4 days, let it sit. I mean, a week went by. I'm sure it had some physical surface rust, of course. I couldn't see it though. in the beginning when I did vehicles, I wouldn't say I lost my butt on it, if you will, but man, I was doing completes for $600.
No way.
Oh, I didn't know. I was brand new to the industry, right? I didn't know. I know I mentioned early on that I had a guy do it for me. He charged me $200 an hour. He did the job. He did a complete for me in 6 hours, charged me $1,200. And so at first I'm like, okay, well, I'll be, 100 or 150 an hour. I started out hourly because I didn't know where to be at. I'm like, okay. And fortunately for the customer, unfortunately for me, money doesn't motivate me. So whether I get $1 an hour or $1 million an hour, the customer's gonna get the same result. I want to do the best quality, the best I can do on every job, period. So, the first few months, I'm here blasting cars, busting my butt, charging, 100, 150 bucks an hour. And I'm like, man, I just spent the whole day. I blast this entire car, and I'm like, $600. I'm like, well, I got $300 of material. Because I still sorting out the machine. I got my diesel fuel. I'm like, wow, I made $100 today. Go me. But that's the beginning, right? I didn't know where to be at. Of course, I'm not charging that anymore. But yeah, that was a huge learning curve for me in the beginning, not knowing the market. It's not like I can call up the guys around me who are blasting and say, hey, Mr. Customer, what are you charging? Even I knew what one guy was charging, but I didn't think I could. Me personally, out of the gate, I'm like, well, I'm new. Maybe I should be charging the $200 an hour that this guy's charging because he sees it. He's been doing this for 5 or 6 years now. I felt bad charging the $200 an hour, even though I'm doing the same results. But until you get customers' feedback, am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
If somebody undercharges in your area,
Devalues everything.
it devalues everything. Exactly. And that's what I communicated to him. We want everybody in this business to charge what they're worth, right? Like
Jeremy. Oh man. I understand what he was saying because that's the biggest learning curve for everybody in the beginning. Every single person is wanting to know how much money to charge. They're hesitant to charge more and lose a job, especially in the beginning when you're hungry and really trying to, start getting jobs. But oh, no, not $150 an hour. Never.
Yeah, it seems like a pattern with a lot of people that we've talked to. And if you must undercharge, learn that lesson fast. Like don't charge that rate forever.
Everyone has that experience. Like every business owner everywhere has to figure out their value. But I will say the thing that we do for our business owners, which I think has been a saving grace for a lot of them, is putting them in a contractor group to see how much everyone is charging.
Yeah.
So that they feel more confident bidding those bigger jobs and requesting what they're worth, which is on average $300 an hour to even just start your machine. Like that is pretty much nationwide. I mean, give or take depending on your area and cost of fuel and things like that. But absolutely, go get them, Jeremy, with $300 an hour and don't even think twice about it.
Thankfully, he has adjusted his rate and he's closer to $300 an hour. So good job, Jeremy.
And thanks for sharing. That seriously is a pain point for a lot of new business owners that I think, is good to hear, that reassurance of like, my services are a premium service and they are worth this price, and devaluing it is only hurting me and the industry. So I think that's great to share. And thanks.
Now that we're on the topic, I do want to ask, with all of your experience, right? 3.5 years, right? What is your approach now to pricing just any kind of job, not just cars?
So cars. So I guess I'll start with cars again. Sorry.
Sure.
Vehicle wise, same. When a customer calls up, hey, I got a 73 Chevy square body pickup truck. Cool, great. Long bed, short bed. Am I doing a complete? Am I not doing a complete? Is it going to be stripped apart? There's a series of questions that I ask. How is this going to come to me, or how am I going to come to you to do it? And then I base my pricing off of that. But once I know what I'm doing, the vehicle, how many parts I'm doing, I give them a range. I give them 2 numbers essentially. It's going to be between X and X based off of that, because customers don't want surprises. I don't want to show up and say, hey, it's going to be $1,000, sir, and all of a sudden it's $2,500. They're going to be like, that's not what we talked about. You know what I mean? So I try to give them a range and prepare them for what it can be. But you and I both know a lot of times people hear the first number you say. It's like, oh, you said it was $1,000. Now you said now it's $1,500. And I'm like, well, I did say between. I don't usually give a $500 swing. You know what I mean? Between it.
The biggest theme that I saw over this conversation was that it's incredibly important to set expectations
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
your client or your customer knows exactly what they're getting. They're not
Yeah.
disappointed or they're not expecting, more than you're going to provide.
Yeah.
And that they're informed, that they know that, they need to prime their surface pretty quickly after you blast.
Yeah.
Like all those things, like it's important to talk them through the whole process.
Which is hard. I feel like that's super difficult. Most people want to overpromise and underdeliver, and then you have a really mad customer and possibly a bad review. So I think that's great advice to really explain the process. A lot of people are not educated on the process. Even you as a blaster are learning things every day. There's so many variables. So being as straightforward and open about what to expect is definitely the way to go. And I think after years of being, a business owner, you get used to it after,
Oh yeah.
one experience of the customer saying, "What? You didn't tell me this." So that's great advice for sure.
Now, when it comes to trailers, for instance, trailers are a different animal. Deep rust, you can't really warp a trailer. Now, a horse trailer you can, but like equipment trailers, I do quite a few of those. That switches gears completely. That's a whole different price point. I give them, okay, this trailer is X amount of feet in length. That starts at this price. After I hit this many hours, it's this much per hour additional moving forward. Because trailers are difficult. You have those I-beams, you got to blast at different angles. There's so much more involved than a trailer. It's twice as physical. You're using a lot more material. My machine is ramped up to 120 and I'm just full bore. I mean, you're on the throttle nonstop and I'm using my equipment basically as heavy as that equipment can do. I'm using it to its fullest potential. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go through, more stuff. The hoses are going to get worn out more. My nozzles are going to get worn out more. I use a lot more aggressive material. It costs more money. So when I price out heavy equipment stuff, it's a whole different animal.
For sure. Seeing how long it takes, because when you think of a trailer, I mean,
Mhm.
I've seen people do like a complete house pretty fast if the paint is thin, or like a log home if whatever. But then you see somebody do a trailer and it takes them, a couple days, maybe 14 hours, and I'm like,
Right.
"What? A
It's
trailer? That
it's
should have happened."
confusing.
Yeah. And then you have some trailers that take 4 hours.
Mhm.
So you do have to kind of know what you're looking at, and if you don't know what you're looking at and you have no idea how long it's going to take you, do a test blast, period. Now I know some of these guys drive an hour, to the job, and they're not able to do a test blast. Well, then definitely use the Facebook group to set those expectations and bid that job properly.
Yeah, we have people in that group every single day,
Yeah.
like commenting on jobs, posting jobs and be like, hey, this is what I just did, or I have a question about this upcoming
Yeah.
job. It's like,
You can post pictures. "Hey, the client sent me
Yeah.
this photo. What would you bid this at?"
yeah, super common. Everyone's in there is really helpful.
Yeah.
I haven't done too much. I do a little in the commercial side of things. I know I've done that big fuel tank, but when it comes to commercial jobs, the jobs that are around here are pretty good sized commercial jobs to be doing. But I feel like they involve, because it's just me. I don't
Okay.
have essentially a guy that blasts for me or with me. It's pretty much me doing all the blasting. And some of these big jobs require a couple of people or bigger equipment. And it's not that you need a bigger pot for larger runtime. Sure, that's fantastic. But I need to be able to run 200 feet of hose. I need to run, 120 to 140 psi nonstop. I need to run, because I'm running a number 5 nozzle. I need to run a 6 or an 8 nozzle. I need something big, like a 375 or a 400 CFM compressor to where I'm efficient. Not saying the DB500 can't do that, but you compare a DB500 to, you go up 3 or 4 levels. I don't know all your levels off the top of my head on your machines, but you run up to like a 375 or a 400 CFM compressor. That machine will run circles around the DB500 because of what it is.
Yeah, no, the reality is the 500 can't do that, and it's no fault of the 500. It's literally it wasn't built for large scale industrial jobs or commercial jobs.
Right.
That's where you need the 800, the
Right.
larger compressor.
I'd like to stop there because for people who are new, have no idea
Yeah.
what just happened. Their world just got rocked. They just heard a bunch of numbers and letters and are confused. So when we say DB500, we're referring to the blast pot. We manufacture standalone blast pots. They all have a number that's based on their cubic feet. Um, all of our blast pots do the exact same thing. They all can remove just about any coating from any surface. They can all wet blast, they can all dry blast, they can all soda blast, and they can all operate anywhere from 30 to 150 PSI. The only difference between each blast pot is how much media it holds before it runs out, and you have to stop and refill it. So when people are like, hey, Kaylin, what blast pot do I need? I'm like, they all do the same thing. It's just how long do you want to blast before you have to stop, depressurize, fill it back up, okay? So that's the first talking point. When he keeps saying DB500, DB500, he's actually referring to his complete mobile unit that he purchased. And with all of our mobile units, we pair your blast pot with an air compressor. That's pretty set. Your air compressor is what determines how efficient you are. When you pair that DB500 with a 185 CFM compressor, you get to be paired with a certain nozzle size. The nozzle is what is at the end of the blast hose. Think of your nozzle as like a paintbrush. If you have someone painting a room with a tiny little paintbrush or a big paintbrush, the guy with the big paintbrush is always going to finish painting that room faster than the guy with the little paintbrush. So why does this matter, right? If you pair that DB500 pot with a huge 425 CFM compressor, you get to go up in your paintbrush size by like 2 to 3 times. So for jobs that require you to cover a large surface area at one time, you want that bigger compressor because you want that bigger nozzle. The compressor and your nozzle size are married. So when he talks about like, hey, the 500's been great, it's because, it can do the exact same thing that our DB800 can do, but the question is, how fast do you need it done? If you're covering a small surface area and you're having to stop and refill every 60 minutes, that time adds up. So when you're really considering going into commercial and industrial jobs, you really want to think about what air compressor you want. Because the blast pot is just the middleman. The blast pot is just the piece of equipment that is holding that material and delivering it out through the nozzle. It's really not determining how fast you're going to remove the coatings.
I couldn't have said that better.
Takes bow. It is so hard to explain to people, though. I feel like, to wrap your head around that, everyone always just asks, what blast pot do I need? What blast pot do I need? And it's like, well, let's just explain the whole thing. And then you tell me, what you're looking to do here. And we have a machine for you.
Right. That's why we try to simplify it, because it is complicated.
Yeah, it is. So, that's awesome that he's looking to upgrade. And actually, we do have a buyback program for people who are wanting to upgrade their equipment. If you've been maintaining that mobile, great, we'll get it in here, we'll service it, and we'll upgrade you. And we love to see our business owners doing well and going up to bigger equipment. So that's awesome. Alrighty, well, Jeremy hit us up with so much good advice that we actually couldn't put it all into one episode. So, today we kind of broke it down more about automotive restoration, a few learning curves, and, pricing jobs recommendations, and talked a little bit about the equipment. So I think we're going to end things here. And make sure you guys come back for more, because we're going to get into how to scale your business, why this business opportunity is great for growth and, adding more revenue streams and scaling that business. But also we're going to talk a lot about log homes, which is what he has been really focusing on lately. I know I've seen a lot of people ask questions about wood restoration in general and log homes. So I think that's going to be awesome. So make sure you guys come back for more. And if you guys have any questions about our equipment or how to start a business with them, visit dustlessblasting.com.